Good evening everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my Tantalus video vlog thing. So, to look at, it's probably not a huge amount of progress compared to the last video. Well, there is and there isn't, but this is where I'm at so far. So, okay, first things first, for some recommendations. I've had some nice comments off a few people that have watched this so far. Thanks for all of those of you that have. My first recommendation when it comes to this kit is, first of all, buy it, because it's an awesome kit. I can't say that enough. It is brilliant. But initially I was quite hopeful when I first looked at all the pieces. Everything seemed to well, everything, as you know, these pieces here, everything looks there's not a lot of bending involved, but actually putting it together is a whole different beast, and it is very tricky. It is quite a fiddly kit, and you will be using boiled water or hot water. I went for boiled water, to be honest, just because it makes everything so much easier to move. But yeah, you'll be using it a lot. You really will. Having said that, it is worthwhile because it does have some great results. So where do we start? So basically, these are my this is how the sub-assemblies look. This is it. This is as far as I'm going to go in terms of the actual building of the model now, in its individual pieces. And this is how I'm going to be painting it, and that's purely for ease, in terms of actual the size of it, the way the pieces fit together. I find this is personally the best way that I'm personally going to find it. So if I take you through a little run through of the reasons why I've done this, hopefully it'll help you guys and you'll enjoy seeing what I've got. So obviously the first piece, ta-da, awesome. This is awesome. It's so cool. So this is the main part of the ship. Apologies for the light. I've got a lamp going as well as my dining room table. Dining room light as well, but it's quite late in the evening I filmed this, so I'm sorry if there's a shadow at all. So what we have got is, we have the main hull section. We then have 1, 2, the side fin sections. They've been glued on. We have the 3 metal, or brass, sorry, standing platforms. You've got the one big one, which is in there. And then you've got 1, 2, which is the littler standing platforms. I glued them in. But before doing so, as you can probably tell, I've painted them up. So underneath this one, the big one, underneath the big one, you can see the slight sort of engine, what's the word, look, for lack of a better word, the engine look as such. Just sit under there. That's literally just Chaos Black, Abaddon Black, sorry, undercoat, followed by lead belcher, dry brush. That is it. Simple as that. All along the sides, inside the model, I've done that. You can just see it in there. And that's literally it for that. So then I glued the brass piece on top, which was also previously painted as well. Believe it or not, I've actually painted the brass bit the same. I did a few layers of Abaddon Black to make sure the paint was sealed on nicely to the brass. Then a dry brush of lead belcher on both sides. So believe it or not, it has been painted to the same standards on the side you will never actually get to see. Same went for these pieces here, 1, 2, they were the same. And you can see just inside I've also painted it lead belcher inside there, and that just because it just works well for the theme for me. This is the engine section as such. There's not going to be sort of any snazzy colour as such going on there. This piece here, definitely just see it, where it's black there on the side, that will eventually become orange, which is the theme of my army, for those of you that have seen the other video logs that I do. But for the deep recesses, that will just black. That'll work out fine. So yes, I glued them on. I then glued on this piece here, this black piece. You see the sort of I'm sort of holding this as well as holding the camera. Sorry guys. This piece here, sorry. This piece I glued on, and I've obviously pre undercoated it. This will also be orange, the same sort of colour orange as what I've used for the rest of my force. And onto the back, I then glued on the three big engine pieces. Okay, so just to recap, for those of you that want to sort of take notes as such, what I did, oh, and this as well, sorry, but I'll come to that. So the first piece was simply the main big piece, followed by the brass section. Okay, what I did to glue this in is I aligned it up with this piece here. Okay, you can do it with either or. I aligned it with this one first, and that was to get the best possible angle for this to fit, because you will find that these brass sections fit into grooves inside here, as well as where this one's cradled into the main big piece as such, the main actual ship. And because of that, and the same goes for this side as well, you kind of have to do it with both to get it best. But what I did is I measured up with one side first before the other, and that's to make sure everything fits, because it can be a bit tight. I had to use a very thin tip of a file just to sort of go along the inside grooves. I'm not sure if you can really see them, you probably can't, but basically where that brass, where it sits in that there's a groove, and you'll need to do that to really get, well, you may not need to, but I found I had to do that to really go along the edges there to make it really fit nicely. So, you know, cleaned up all the parts in general. So this, then I glued this in, whilst also gluing this in to one side. Obviously, you know, made sure everything fit first with lots of dry testing. So glued this on with this, okay, let it set, let it set and be all glued and nice and tight. Then I slotted this one in, this brass piece here, onto here. Okay, so then we had one whole half done. Next up, I then glued this section onto this side, because I'd already pre-dry measured it, so I knew that this would fit into this fine. I can't stress it enough. Test and check everything that you put together with this kit. You really need to. The only difference I did was I glued this piece, this brass piece, onto this first, then this whole section, this whole piece here, was then glued on to the rest. Okay, so you ended up with it looking like this. Now, through experience from what I've just done, you could glue these smaller brass pieces onto just the individual thin sections first, then glue them on with this, you know, afterwards. It's not a right or wrong way of doing it. It's just, you know, entirely up to you. But that's two ways around it. But what I will say for definite is, for Christ's sake, dry test it, dry fit it over and over and over again. Yeah, and you'll end up with it looking pretty damn good. I had to use a lot of boiled water to get these into shape. But as you can see, they have come out nicely. Let's get it. They look nice and parallel. You know, they're really good. I'm really pleased with that. There's a slight odd difference there, I suppose. You could say that side is slightly more bent down. But again, some boiled water treatment won't hurt that at all. Okay, so the next problem with this kit I've noticed is, if you look at those two small standing platform sections, the one on the right, the one on this side, you will notice it's slightly at an angle compared to the one on the left. Now, there is no way I can do anything about that. That's purely the mould. That's purely this right section's mould shape. It's obviously not bending towards the engine enough. I don't know if you can see that, but you can clearly see the centre engine. Look to the right of that. You can see the right engine. Look to the left of it. You can see it's not. You cannot see the left engine like you can see the right one. So what I'm saying is, basically this piece here, it seems, rather than this one curls up nicely round, this one seems to basically go like that. It's sort of going off on its own tangent in that direction rather than that way. Honestly, there's nothing I could have done about that, because from my perspective it looked fine. So there's not a lot I can do with that, really. In hindsight, if I knew it was, you know, it's only after I actually glued this on properly that I could actually see that this had happened. The only other thing I could think of would have been to have, you know, gone back in time, hopped in my TARDIS, dunked it in hot water, and then tried to bend it round. But luckily, as it is, it's not too much of a big problem, to be honest. We can work around it. This piece, which will eventually sit in there, it covers it up nicely, and you can position it so it doesn't actually make too much of a difference. So luckily it's not the end of the world, but for those of you out there that want to make it real spot on, real, you know, nice looking kit, you know, just keep an eye out for that. Like I say, there's nothing you could have really done or I could have done to really prevent it or even, you know, notice that. It's just one of those things. Yeah, but I can work around it, so it's not a problem, but it's worth mentioning. Next up was this piece. I glued this piece on. Okay, now as you can see, there will be some filing needed for definite. Same with up here as well. Look, where the join isn't quite lined up there. I'm going to get file and just go over that as best I can, and a little bit of green stuff as well. This is far from ready to be painted as yet, guys. I should probably say that. This is purely just a part. This is just to let you guys know where I'm at in terms of just building the thing. But as you can see, the seal's nice and sealed up. It does match up nicely, but I did need to use, I'm going to need to use some green stuff. I'm going to need to use a file, and I'm going to need a lot of patience and time just to very slowly and gently file this. You can see where it's a bit, there's a bit of a gap there, isn't there? See, there's a gap there, and you can see there's lots of resin overhang where it's not quite a smooth, flush surface. Same there as well. And the other thing you'll find with this piece is it is very, I had to really shape this with real hot water, boiled water, quite a few times. And what I ended up doing was actually, once I'd reshaped it so it actually fit as a dry fit piece, I then ended up gluing it whilst it was super bendy and flexible. I literally pulled out the hot water, bosh, super glue that side, popped it in that side, shaped it, held it together, dried in seconds, because super glue with a tiny smidge of water, you will find super glue dries like mad. It's like concrete. But for that reason, do be careful. But that was the only way I could get this to really set and sit nicely in the two sections that it's meant to sit in. So I hope that helps as well for a little bit of advice. But again, it's a lovely little section of model. I mean, look at that, it does it really cool. It's really good. I really enjoy that. So that's that bit. That's my tip for this bit, and that's how it worked for me. And then lastly, or was it lastly? Well, as I'm going around to it, I've stuck on these three engines. Now, can you see a gap there? I'm sure you can. See that massive great line there? And you can see the same there as well. And working underneath the model, you can see some gaps there. That is the green stuff. Green stuff will be filling that in. It will be filling in those sections there, and the same on the other side, on the wingtips, I should say, if you can see it. See it all there? That'll all be green stuff. That's simply just because of where the mould, the pieces just don't quite sit, don't quite, align together. You can see where there's a massive great gap is, compared to that side, you can see it's actually a deliberate square hole, and that is for these little buggers, these little small engine pieces. They, in all their wisdom, created little bits, see? Little grooves, like most things would connect together. Right, I'll tell you right now, they will not fit in these little holes. It's as they currently stand, they will not fit in these holes. So I personally am going to green stuff in those two big gaps. Okay, so it's going to be a flush fit for the ones of the little engines that will fit in those two sections there and there. Okay, apologies for the blurriness, but I'm sure you can see what I'm getting at. The other grooves, see the two on the left and right side of this engine, and the two there, excuse me, they will fit in those holes if you chip a little bit off of their, I can't think of the word. Basically, where are I? That little groove there, I'm going to cut a little bit of that off to make it actually fit better into there. Now you might wonder, why haven't I glued all the engine pieces in? Now my personal preference here, my recommendation for those of you would like to have a bit of advice or just wondering, is why is it not focusing? It's just not focusing, is it? I do apologise. The reason is these three big engine pieces are, well, huge. They're big, aren't they? So that means it's going to be easy to dry brush them. What I'm going to do is paint a lot of the back of this model black, dry brush it with lead belcher. I'm then going to use the usual mithril silver or whatever the colour is, and I'm going to go over it with tin bits and a few other sort of more bronzy colours to give it that sort of superheated cooled down metal look. That sort of almost brass sort of tinge to it, But because they're such big pieces, it's really easy to dry brush them with detail on this model. Now if you imagine all of these little engine pieces sitting in between all of that, dudes, it's going to be a nightmare to get any sort of real nice finish. So I'm going to dry brush this piece, and once it's all green stuffed, but I'm going to dry brush this piece, go over all the bits and bobs with a big brush. It'll make it look lovely, and then I will individually undercoat and dry brush all of these pieces separately before gluing them onto the model. It might involve a little bit of repainting if we get some glue spillage, you know, such and such, but I'd rather do that. That's my recommendation for that. So that is the plan for that. And then from there, guys, it's literally just monkey see, monkey do. So all of these pieces I'm going to paint. These are the weapons, obviously. I'm sure you guys will recognise these pieces. These are Forge World cast versions of the usual Raider pilot equipment and the little sail guidance section. I'll be painting all of these in individual, the mast, all of these bits I'll be painting individually, and these here as well. I'll paint all of that individually as I would any other Raider. Simple as that. So they're my sub-assemblies. We have this section here, which is this was the first piece I actually built. And again, a little bit of patience, line up the brass with the grooves. Whoops a daisy, he says as he chucks on the floor. So line up the pieces with the grooves. You will need a peg or something here, because this piece I found just bent. Rather than being straight, it would go. So you need a peg to hold this piece together here when it's gluing. Okay. Unfortunately, I must have got a bit of super glue bleed, because it has kind of fixed the rudder into position, which isn't a huge personal bother of mine, but for those of you that like stuff that moves, do be very, very, very careful of that possibility. Otherwise, I'm going to use a lot of undercoats to get this all nicely covered. Same with the underside. You can see I've put a slight splash of primer underneath it as well. And this piece I will paint individually, same as all the rest of this kit. I will then glue it into there. You can see where it will sit basically in there. If I just tilt it that way a bit, because I haven't got enough hands, it will sit flush in this gap here. As you can see, badly demonstrated. There might be glue spillage again, so of course it will stand out like a sore thumb. Again, I can overpaint. I'd rather overpaint little pieces here and there than struggle to paint the whole thing because of all the details and intricacies involved. Lastly is the sail. A wonderful, wonderful piece of kit. Again, it took a lot of cleanup, and again I did need hot water to try and get it in shape, and as you can see at the very top it does kind of go off on the so I will be using the hot water treatment one more time just to get that top piece, literally that piece there, straightened out. Do be very, very careful, guys, because the fin, or the sail, sorry, when it connects up to the fin section as such, that is very, very thin there, and the plastic I've found, or the resin, has actually snapped off. There's actually nothing there now. So I'm going to go over all of these thin sections here, all these spines. I'm going to go over with with a little drop of super glue, let it all seal up, just to give it a bit more strength, because it's very, very, very flimsy, guys. So take your time with that for definite. And again, I'm going to paint this up individually. I will be gluing it, kind of sits like that. Again, I will be gluing it, and again, it will eventually sit somehow roughly like that. Bosh. Isn't that glorious miniature? Say miniature. It's huge, but it's glorious, isn't it? But that's my vlog so far. To do just this, to get all this cleaned up, ready to go, to build this and this to the point that it's at, it was about 4 hours, 5 hours, I kid you not, and that was over a couple of evenings. And again, it's just because of the dry testing. You're constantly checking yourself, or I am, and again, a little bit of painting involved as well. Just going for all the bits and bobs. Do take your time. I recommend the kit. It's a brilliant kit, and I do hope this video helps to some extent. But it is it's taxing on your concentration, and as you can see, even with my best intentions and my best skills, it still doesn't quite line up in sections there. Again, it's one of those things where you can't always predict it because of the awkwardness of each piece. It's hard to even use elastic bands like you would do with most models to help sort of hold it together in a dry fit situation. But yeah, just take your time. It's easily rectifiable. Worst comes to worst, I can sort of sculpt the sides, or just simply try and just paint it on. Even worst comes to worst, you can even get around it by painting it. So it's not the end of the world at all. But that is it, guys. That is where I'm at. I do hope it helps. I do hope it gives you some advice, and you just enjoyed watching it anyway. I always enjoy these sort of videos personally myself. I just had some more Inkybee turn up in the post this morning, courtesy of Amazon. So, oh yeah, it's going to be good. But yeah, just overall, guys, do take your time when building this kit, bit by bit. Check and check and check. Build the pieces as I recommend doing them. They're the two biggest sub-assembly pieces, and then the rest is literally just off the sprues as they are. Paint them individually, glue them together afterwards, and any sort of glue spillage that dries out, like super glue typically always has that sort of white residue, bits of lump driedness. You can file them down, repaint over them with hardly any time at all. That is my plan. So next video will probably be more or less, a lot of stuff undercoated and just green stuff where it's been applied, I would imagine. Thank you guys, take care, have a nice evening or a nice morning, depending when you guys see this video uploaded. I'll be uploading it very shortly. And thanks again for watching. Take care guys, see you soon. Bye bye.